Charles Taylor Jr. of the Secret Service had described the hole in his report, and of course without knowing that anybody had observed it before then. But he also was absolutely 100% convinced that that shot had to emanate from the front of the Kennedy limousine, thus indicating that a shot had been fired from the front, to his mind, to 100% certainty. I asked him what had happened to the original windshield. His answer to me was, "We scrapped it." I said, "You destroyed it?" And he says, "That's right. Our orders were to scrap that windshield."
After George Whitaker died in 2001, this statement was found amongst his possessions, reaffirming for future generations exactly what he had told Doug Weldon 8 years previously.
This document was discovered, and for me, it gave the final stamp of approval that what he told me on that August day in 1993 was in fact the truth of what really happened.
One of the assassination's most significant smoking guns, indicating both a conspiracy and a cover-up, is kept here. Kennedy's original autopsy photographs, taken at Bethesda Hospital on the night of his death, have always been used to support the lone gunman theory.
I've looked at these autopsy photographs at the National Archives on many occasions now. I've actually been there on 9 separate visits. When the photographs of the back of the head at the autopsy were shown to 16 Parkland doctors, all 16 said they did not recognize that photograph as what they had seen in the emergency room at Parkland Hospital. How many people did recognize it? 0. When I went to the archives to look at these photographs of the back of the head, there's a pair of photographs, so I used the stereo viewer. And what I saw was really quite shocking. This whole area of hair on the back of the head, with the hair standing up, looked as if it had been glued in one particular plane in space. It was two-dimensional, whereas the rest of the photograph is three-dimensional. And the 3D effect occurs for virtually all the other pairs of photographs, so this was unique. The back of the head, this area, and the hair sticking up here looked as though it was simply two-dimensional, as if it had been glued into one position in space, in one plane. It was the most bizarre. What does that mean? Photographic forgery. We get a 3D effect for all the image except for the place where it's exactly the same because it's been dubbed in. So they took out basically the part where the hole was, and instead they used a soft matte insert to put in the same image on each of these photos of the back of the head, so that it would look like there was no damage back here. If there's a big hole at the right rear of the head, that means a shot from the front. That can't be Oswald. So the conspirators were hard-pressed at this point. They had to get rid of that big hole at the back of the head, or it would have clearly shown shots from the front and no possibility of a lone gunman.
Remarkable testimony regarding the autopsy photographs comes for the first time from veteran World War II photographer Joe O'Donnell. He worked for the State Department and then the U.S. Information Agency for a total of 23 years, serving with distinction under 6 presidents. He was devastated by Kennedy's death.
He was a fine man, he really was. And I hate to say it, but I really loved him. I really did. Wonderful person.
A close colleague of Joe's for many years was the late Robert Knudsen, a Navy photographer who was permanently attached to the White House.
He didn't have many friends, not in the press. They were envious of him. But he was a very nice fellow. We always got along great.
On the night of Kennedy's assassination, Robert Knudsen never came home. He returned to his family 3 days later, deeply disturbed. He told them he had taken many photographs of the president's body in the morgue at Bethesda, and that it was the hardest assignment he'd ever had. He said the Secret Service had controlled all of the film.
A few days after the assassination, I was at the White House in the press room, and Knudsen came to me, and he said, Joe, I have something I want to show you. So I went back to his sort of a work room, and he pulled out an envelope. and showed me about 12 pictures, 5 by 7, and had all these pictures of the president on his stomach and on his back, and could see the hole here, about 3/8 of an inch, and the back of his head above the line, big hole about the size of a grapefruit. And then a couple days later, maybe a day later, he said, "Joe, have a minute?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "I want to show you something. Those pictures I showed you the other day, these are the same ones, but a little different." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Let me show you." He got the first one out, and I said, "No hole." He said, "No, they covered it up." And I looked in the back. The hole was neatly covered up. And I said, "Who did that?" He said, "Well, I didn't do it." I said, "Well, I'm not saying you did, but I'm surprised."
There is no record of Robert Knudsen attending Kennedy's autopsy, yet he had photographs in his possession that had clearly been altered to disguise a shot from the front.
These photographs were always in the control of the Secret Service. So whoever changed this, whoever modified it, either had to be in the government or had to have the approval of the government to do this. We certainly can't imagine the Mafia, for example, doing this, or the Soviets. There's just no way. It had to be someone with government approval.
The government continues to be haunted by the discrepancy between the wounds the autopsy photographs show and what the Dallas doctors actually saw.
In the late 70s, the House Select Committee on Assassinations looked at the evidence of the Kennedy assassination, and one of the most disturbing things about that evidence when they looked at it was the fact that there were a team of doctors where Kennedy had been taken right after he was shot in Dallas. These are Dallas doctors who were experienced in trauma who had said he had a hole in the back of his head. The House Select Committee on Assassinations was trying to say that Oswald had done it, and with a hole in the back of the head, if you're being shot in the back and the bullet blowing out in front, that doesn't fit. So the House Select Committee reported that it had refuted the Dallas doctors. The Dallas doctors all got it wrong because they had better witnesses. Their witnesses were the witnesses that were there in the morgue during the autopsy. And they said that 26 witnesses that they'd interviewed all endorsed the autopsy photographs showing the head wound up here. None of them agreed that there was a wound back here.
There is no medical evidence that President Kennedy was hit from the front and to the right.
But they didn't let us see the interviews. They didn't let us see the documents that these people had prepared. In fact, they were scheduled to have been suppressed until 2028. When the documents tumbled out in the mid-1990s, lo and behold, the autopsy witnesses, who the House Select Committee had interviewed, said the same thing the Dallas doctors did. The hole in the head was back here. They drew diagrams showing a hole in the head back here or back here, and it became very apparent that the House Select Committee had just interviewed these people, suppressed their testimonies, and then misrepresented them in their report.
The forensic pathological panel simply says that if he was shot at from the front and to the right, the shot missed.
The doctors who were supposed to evaluate the medical evidence for the House Select Committee on Assassinations never saw these suppressed interviews where not only were the Dallas doctors saying there's a hole in the back of the head here, but so were the morgue witnesses saying there was a hole in the back of the head. So it was a complete abomination. It was perhaps the most dishonest thing that was ever done, and it was apparently done to keep Oswald as the central figure in this scenario.
As the cover-up of Kennedy's murder slowly unravels and the true picture unfolds, new smoking guns are revealed. This is the Field of Honor in Restland Cemetery, Dallas.